Here's another top story that's happening today. President Trump says Israel and Hamas have signed off on first phase of the initial agreement. And we know it was confirmed by Israeli officials and Hamas, as well as the mediator in this. Qatar, we want to bring in Cécile Shea. She is the security and diplomacy expert with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule, Cécile.
Oh, my pleasure to be here, Tria. A lot of important news going on.
Yeah, we do. But we've talked about this. I think we spoke earlier in the week really about, we were talking about the ceasefire and what this looks like. Let me ask you this. What are the main elements included in the first phase of this deal so far?
Well, let's just say, first of all, that Netanyahu's cabinet needs to first approve this deal, and they're supposed to do that in the next 4 or 5 hours. That's been an issue in the past. It looks like this time Netanyahu has his entire cabinet on his side. The initial parts of the deal are very importantly that the Israeli hostages who are still alive, there's probably 20 or 30 of them who are still alive, been in captivity for 2 years now, should be released hopefully on Monday. The remains of a number of hostages who have died in captivity, that number could be fairly large, 30 people maybe. The remains should also be released. In return, Israel has agreed to release a number of Palestinian political prisoners. These are people who have been in Israeli jails sometimes for a long time, as well as some of the Gazans who Israel has captured during these 2 years of fighting. Israel has also agreed to pull back from part of Gaza. One of the Israeli spokesperson is saying that Israel will still control, during this first phase, 55% perhaps of Gaza, but we have not seen anything official as far as how far they will pull back. The next phase is going to be more difficult, and I think you alluded to that. And so, initially now we have a promise for a ceasefire. Israel is still attacking different areas in Gaza. They say that they won't stop until 24 hours after the ceasefire is approved. And Hamas seems willing to do its part, which is to release the hostages on Monday and Tuesday. But beyond that, we're going to have to see what happens because there's quite a few challenges still ahead. But I'm make no doubt about it, I'm relieved. I think when we spoke the other day, I said I was more optimistic than I'd been in a year, but I wasn't completely optimistic. So this is actually great news. I'm relieved about this, but there's still quite a bit to do.
I know the last time we spoke, again, we were talking about, the ceasefire, a timeline on this. Do we have a timeline as of yet of when that ceasefire would actually take effect?
So if the Israeli cabinet approves the deal tonight, and the last I heard it was going to be 8 p.m. Israel time, so a few hours from now. For the security, when I checked 20 minutes ago, the security cabinet, which is a small part of the cabinet, was still meeting, and then the full cabinet will get together, and there are some very hardcore right-wingers on that cabinet, so it could be quite an emotional discussion. And then once they approve it, 24 hours after that approval, the ceasefire would go into effect. So we're hoping, maybe 30 hours from now or so, if nothing else goes wrong.
I know we were talking about, hostages and, people being released and what that looks like. How many hostages do we know are remaining, and how many are still alive?
I mean, that's really the question. Israel believes somewhere between 20 and 30, probably at the lower end of that estimate, and they are in really rough shape. There's been some photos that have shown this week that are really troubling to see. Remains, there's been different numbers, 30 remains, possibly 40 remains, 30 remains is probably more realistic. So that's the big number there. In terms of the prisoners that Israel will release, there had been talk of up to 1,000. It now looks like it will be a slightly smaller number than that. But that's been a sticking point in past negotiations where the Palestinians were demanding that certain people be released and Israel didn't want to release them. It seems like they have some kind of informal agreement of who will be released. So I hope so. So that seems to not be such the sticking point this time.
We also spoke last time about previous presidents that tried to get to this point, to get this deal done. They were not successful. We have seen President Trump reach some success in all of this. What role has the United States really played in this agreement?
President Trump has played a huge role, as has his son-in-law. So I give credit to Jared for helping his father-in-law, because Jared knows how to. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, knows very well how to communicate with his father-in-law, and he has worked very closely with the president on this deal, as has Tony Blair. And so the president understands the importance. You've also seen that the president has been very upset by the pictures of starving children in Gaza, and he really wants the fighting to end. And on top of that, there's a report that he was very upset when Israel attacked Qatar about, what has it been now, 6 weeks or 2 months ago. He thought that was out of line on Israel's part. And so Netanyahu lost a little bit of standing in President Trump's eyes at that point. But to get to your specific question, President Trump's ability this time, or willingness this time, to really put his foot down on both sides and tell Netanyahu in no uncertain terms that he needs to come up with approval for this agreement and stop attacking the civilians if there is an agreement. And then telling Hamas, you'd better sign this agreement or I'm going to tell Bibi that he can do whatever he wants and go in and destroy the rest of Gaza. Like, that clearly also got Hamas's strong attention, as it should have. So President Trump, deserves a lot of the credit for coming around and really pressuring both sides to work on this in good faith and come up with a ceasefire so that we can now move to the next phase.
And speaking of, the first phase that we're really still in, do you think this will lead to a lasting peace agreement there? And why or why not, in your opinion?
Yeah, so a lasting peace would be peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And interestingly, one thing that seems to have changed is President Trump now agrees there has to be a Palestinian state. Some of his ideas earlier in this term of figuring out a way to have the Gazans part of another country or something, that's not workable.